Hello. Nadine Page is a holistic health practitioner specializing in mental health and addiction through her extraordinary clinic, The Creative Well. Nadine and I met through Facebook, I do believe, last year on lockdown when I put out a call to invite individuals to take part in a community kind of video that I was doing for a song called Another Record That Changed My Life. I seem to recall Nadine bringing in Prince's Batman to the array of amazing albums that we had in that video. And we've since become really good friends. She has the same birthday to me, so there's a good super connection there. But also, she's an expert in addiction, and that's something that obviously has been a huge part of my life, and something I'm particularly interested in terms of tech and how we've just gone through a year where we're really dependent on tech. So I got to talk to Nadine in depth about all of that in this conversation. Hope you enjoy it.
The feelings coming through your fingertips. Don't slide for more. Don't slide for more.
Hello, Nadine.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
You're most welcome. So, look, I'm going to get straight into it. Addiction is obviously something that you know a lot about, have experience with people suffering from addiction, and you've just seen the first 5 minutes of my film Super Connected, or screen album as I should call it, about a teenager who, and it's based on a real story that a friend of mine told me about, a teenager suffering from disconnection, not being able to relate to people in the real world, frightened to really make relationships with their school friends, but then suddenly finding some empowerment through tech. What, just as a kickoff, what was your impression when you watched the video?
It just looked all too familiar, really. It's kind of a sight that I see quite a lot, with friends. And, when you go to visit friends, everyone's kind of like just sitting there on their phones, even though we're all sat around together, and people are engrossed in, taking photos, taking selfies, not really being in the moment. So, I'm guilty as well. I love taking photos.
Me too.
Love taking photos of everything. And I think, having just had this year, I think it's been really important to have those photos to kind of like look at as well, those memories, more so than, but I think, I really resonated with watching that, because I think it's very, very, it's become the norm. And I think we are living our lives very much through technology, through our phones. And we're friends with people on our phones, but we've got people around us and we're not connecting with the people that are in the same room as us.
Something that you just said that really resonated with me was it being in the moment. Being in a moment when you're, I don't know, at a football match or at a gig, shoulder to shoulder with people, listening to your favorite band or something. It is very different, isn't it, to the moments that we have on social media and different platforms?
Yeah, I think so. I think for me, when I go to a football match, it's easier to be in that moment. I'm not really thinking I want to take a picture. I'm kind of like following the ball, following the players. But when I go to a gig, I love taking photos of pop stars, and I love to be able to come away and look at, some of my photography. And, I love taking the videos, but I wouldn't be somebody who would video all the way through, because I need to be there and I need to immerse myself in that music. And I think it's very, very different. And I think I go to lots of gigs, as you know, and I think I watch people, and it's almost like I'm watching them through the phone if I'm behind them, which isn't very often, so I like to be at the front, but I watch people and they're just phones up the whole time, and they're not really watching in the moment. They watch it later, but not there. But I have to say, I've been very grateful for having some of those video memories and those photographs this last year, when I haven't been able to go to gigs. I've been able to relive those moments.
Yeah, of course.
It's actually become quite important to me to be able to enjoy some of that music that that I'd enjoyed previously, because we've had nothing, have we? It's been a bit of a drought this last. In fact, we've only had you. That's all I've had in lockdown. Is the 2 socially distant gigs with you. And that's been hard, but yeah, I guess that video has kind of kept a lot of us going, the memories, and it connects us even after that moment. So if we go to a gig, we would maybe, tag each other, and it's something that we can talk about. And then a year later, 2 years later, the memory comes up and we can talk about it again. So it does help to connect. And sometimes the memories come up and I forget that because I do so much, I forget that I've even done that. So that's also quite nice that you can capture some of those memories.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you have a really healthy sort of way of using and engaging with social media. I think you're talking about Facebook mostly, only with the tagging. What is it in your experiences working with people suffering from addiction that makes you slightly different to somebody else who just can't stay still on whatever device that they're using? What do you think is causing that? Because it obviously hasn't affected you.
No, I think for me personally is I love life. I love to wake up in the morning and I love to look out the window, whether it's raining and grey or if it's sunny. I have an appreciation of everything around me. And I love moments. I love being with people. I love connecting with people. I love being in real life with people. And I think maybe that's something that drives me. Maybe it's something that doesn't scare me, but I think my experience of working with people, if that's what you're asking me, is that some of the people that I work with find communicating a little bit more difficult. And I think you're very similar to me, and as you love being with people, you love that human contact. And I got that from you the first time that I met you, that you love people. And I think it's kind of like, it's like medicine. I love being with people. I like connecting. I like touching people, but not everybody does. Not everybody feels comfortable with that. And I think what technology gives you is
Which
that.
is okay as well, isn't it? It's okay.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
we're talking about those that find themselves in a difficult or state mentally.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it kind of, I think what I was going to try and say was that.
So yeah, you said technology gives, and
Yeah, no, sorry. I think technology kind of gives people the freedom to be able to talk, but not to be seen. And it's very apparent to me over this last year that everybody relates very differently to technology, and people that have no problem normally just kind of texting or whatever don't like to be seen, and or don't want to speak. They only text. They claim to be isolated, but they won't. It's almost like, well, I think, well, you could connect a lot more on a different level if you put the video on. But I guess that's the difference. So I think for me, I don't use it as necessarily my only way of communicating with people. I don't use it because I can't communicate, whereas I think some people find that more difficult, and I think that might be the difference.
My fictional story in Super Connected is based loosely on a real story. And I just wondered, do you already know about people, particularly younger people, that have been in that situation after the pandemic is starting to feel like there's, it's subsiding to a point. I mean, there are other societal issues that have been thrown up by it, but for the most part, I think most people at the moment feel like we're coming out of it. I hope. And I just wondered if you have experiences of people coming out of it and not knowing how to step out of it, like the character in my story.
I think so. I think again in my clinic, just kind of going back to that, I've got quite a lot of new clients, and they seem to be getting younger and younger. And I think really what we're seeing is another kind of pandemic now. And, for a whole year, people haven't really been able to connect in person. People have got used to hiding behind their screens. And what people are telling me is that they're feeling very anxious, and they're feeling very anxious about going back to normal life.
Mm.
And before the pandemic happened, I've got a couple of people that I'm working with who weren't doing so great. And actually, one of them, the parents are going to have to pull her out of school. And it's almost like technology saved her life. And she's been able to do her schooling through technology. So she hasn't had to come out. But
Mm.
now, she's actually now starting to have to go back to school and start to integrate. And it's quite frightening. It's quite scary. So it's
Mm.
almost like we've got like a different kind of pandemic, like an agoraphobic kind of pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah,
And then,
I mean, agoraphobia is one of the things that I've tried to build into that character,
yeah.
that's that's in the film and the album. But when you were talking, it made me want to ask you, if we'd gone through this pandemic, I don't know, 25 years ago or 30 years ago. Would you think it would have been easier maybe to have come out of it and connect to people? Because we're coming out of something
Mm,
also after getting used to and really embracing connecting to people in the digital
mm,
space silently, when we don't really have to speak or be seen if we don't want to, for about, I think, 17 years, isn't it, since Facebook
mm.
started. We've had like nearly 2 decades of getting used to that way of connecting. Suddenly we're shut up and for a year, and it's really complicated knowing how to go back to being
Mm,
with people. Do you think it's complicated going back to real, physical social interaction,
mm.
because of the pandemic, or do you think it's because of actually the journey we've been on for the last two
Yeah.
decades?
I think it's a bit of both. I think the people are telling me that they are scared of contagion, even though we've got the vaccine. A lot of people that I work with have autoimmune disorders, so they are fearful of kind of going back.
That's a
Um,
very real fear. I understand. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. There's a real fear, and obviously, that I work with artists as well, so there's a real
Mm.
fear of going back to performing. Um,
Is
because,
there? That's interesting. Have you, of course, you work with a lot
mm,
of people in the music industry,
mm,
in terms of
mm,
uh, addiction and trying to find ways to heal that problem.
mm, yeah.
Are there a lot of musicians that that are
Mm.
a bit frightened about playing?
Yeah, so people who have never experienced performance anxiety before. So you've got session musicians, touring musicians, artists themselves that haven't played for a whole year, haven't necessarily picked up their instrument very much for a whole year as well. So now I'm thinking, oh gosh, it's all going to open up. And for the first time, because I mean, performance anxiety is very common. I mean, at least 50% of artists and musicians do experience performance anxiety. But what I'm seeing particularly is people who have never suffered it before are
Mm.
now they're anxious about that. But I think your question is really interesting about, and I've had this conversation with my husband. What would this have been like if this had happened back in the 80s when we were kids, when we had no
Mm.
phones and we couldn't call our friends? I mean, a lot of us didn't have home telephones, let alone mobile
Yeah,
telephones, and you couldn't see, so you'd never. I mean, how you contacted your friends, I don't know how. Looking back, we just knew where we would
mm,
all be in a given day. We would just rock up down the beach or rock up in the town or something. You would just knock for somebody. But
yeah.
I think it would have been very different. And so your question's really interesting. So I don't think we would really know what the answer would be, but I think we would all be like a lot more. I think we would be anxious about going back. So I think I remember, like, when I went to school, that you'd have the summer holidays, you'd be anxious about that first day about going back, not
Mm.
about anything in particular, but you hadn't seen people for like 6 weeks maybe,
Yeah.
and it was, you got those butterflies the night before, but everything was fine when you got there. But yeah, I think we will never know the answer to that, but I think there is definitely something in that, in
Mm.
as much as I think because you don't have the technology, you've got to rely on being able to speak to people.
Mm.
And what I find fascinating is people that you didn't necessarily talk to at school because they found it very difficult to talk. You
Mm.
come on Facebook and they're the most chattiest people in the world. You meet them in real life, they're still not.
Do you think that is a valuable tool for some individuals to
Mm.
I don't know, to address and overcome difficulties regarding communication, or do you think it's um, I don't know, like a crutch? Because a person that will communicate all day long on platforms online
Mm.
would obviously find it really frightening, maybe to do it in real life. I mean, is it a stepping stone towards the real way that we communicate in real time, in real life,
Yeah.
or is it in danger of sort of replacing it for some of those people
Yeah.
who find it difficult?
It also enables it gives people it enables them to be able to communicate in ways that they didn't have before. So, it's kind of six of one and half a dozen of the other. It's almost like we
Yeah.
shoehorn everybody into the same box, but actually there are many ways to communicate, and we feel comfortable with more with certain types of ways of communicating, don't we? And
Mm.
I always prefer face to face, eye contact,
Mm.
and that's what I personally prefer. But other people don't like that. And I think it's just kind of being aware, isn't it, that, you know, in terms of mental health and in terms of uh,
Yeah.
in terms of technology, it's got its pros and it's got its, you know, kind of it can be quite detrimental as well.
Mm.
Like, the girl in your video, that didn't seem so healthy. But I guess the way that I would want to work with her is probably initially through that medium to get her to open up, to talk, and
Yeah, that's the irony, isn't it? That there has to be a way, and in later on in the film, actually, there's yeah, it is something that
yeah.
comes through the screen that ends up transforming her for the
Yeah,
better. Yeah,
yeah.
but can't talk about that yet.
It
But
was very it was very powerful, though. The bit that I saw was very powerful and,
mm,
very meaningful for the moment, for
I
sure.
mean, I started off with a extremely, almost entirely negative view of tech communications, with the exception of what I do with it to make music, because of course
Mhm,
I make music with people across the globe, with the use of computers and various platforms that enable us to do it, even though we're thousands of miles away from each other.
mhm,
But apart from that, all of it has just, driven me mad for years, and I still struggle with it. But it has been the last year that's really enabled me to see that mostly it's an amazing extension of our humanity,
mm,
technology in general. It's just there are some people running the organizations
mm,
responsible for the way the tech is used, which where it meets commerce and retail, and becomes ultimately quite manipulative, of all of us, that I'm still very much struggling with.
yeah, yeah, for sure, yeah, and I think I'm looking at that girl in the video as well. If she didn't have that technology, she would
Mm,
maybe have been even more withdrawn. So maybe, like, kinda
yeah.
like flipping it, maybe that was her outlet, that was her way of communicating, that was
Mm,
something that kept her connected.
yeah.
The way that we would want her to connect, because that's not how we connect. But I think, if we kind of like look at it from her perspective, maybe, I mean, because obviously it's a 5-minute bit that I've seen, and you don't know her as a person really. But I think we need to get to know people. And I think we're very quick to judge technology as something that actually is quite negative. But
Mm.
actually, this year it's been very positive. It's been positive for you and your music. It's connected you and I. We would
I
never.
learned very quickly
Yeah,
to embrace it, because I don't know, it just seemed like there was nothing else to do, or there were things to do, but in terms of trying to reach out to other people, and yeah, we wouldn't have met if I
no,
hadn't made that other video with the records and all the rest of it. It's yeah, there is a way to bring community together online for sure. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Um, and just in terms of the work, the weekly work that you do with the practice at the Creative Well,
Mm.
have you met any? I don't know what ages that you work with, but I was interested if you've met musicians who are that young that they haven't actually done gigs yet.
Mm.
Because I've mentored a few students were at that point, maybe 15, 16, and were just about to start, exploring performance
Mm.
of their music that they've written, and they couldn't because of the
Yeah,
lockdown.
and
Have you come across that?
yeah, I have a few clients actually. I'm thinking of one, well, I think of two in particular. One here in the UK. So he's a student. He's not qualified yet. So he's like in music production, but he would have been going out and he would have been having placements and he'd been, learning his craft, if you like,
Mm,
out the road, and everything's kind of like shut down. And he goes to a state of the art college with all the equipment that he could possibly want, but he can't access any of it. Everything's online. So he's not having the experience that, other people would necessarily have on his course.
yeah.
But yeah, I've got this guy that I work with out in the States, and he left um, uni in New York and he went to LA, and he was just about to go out on the road and then everything had pulled. So I mean,
Mm,
the problem with that is that when COVID hit out there, everyone that he was living with and sharing with, they all kind of went back to their families, and he was now left in a place where he couldn't afford, had no
mm.
job. He had a residence somewhere as well, and then he was also had like this little tour that he was going to go out and do. So that's it.
How old, if you don't mind me asking?
He's some 22.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I've got another guy who's slightly older, in a different part of America, Minneapolis, and he was in the process. He'd written an album. He was in the process of launching that in LA, and they were going out on massive tours, like really big tours. And again, that was all pulled as well.
Yeah.
It's been really hard to kind of
Well,
help
that
them.
age, and that's the where that's for me, that's where for people that age, that's where technology has fallen down. Because I remember, with one of my students, I was sort of talking to her about this is absolutely the time, sort of 16 to 20, in my mind, for somebody who wants to perform live as well and pursue the path of the artist in music. That's the time to kind of, number one, make all your mistakes out in public, really out in public, in clubs, and learn to listen, collect as a collective. When you're in a band or you have a band behind you, if you're a kind of singer or something, to be able to really experience being in the sonic space with people as you're making this energy up that
Mm,
the people in front of you start to receive and then throw back at you, and it becomes this wonderful
mm,
exchange of energy. And she asked me, she said, is there anything that we can do online instead of that?
mm,
And I mean, I just, you can't. So I don't know how. I mean, so much is possible with
mm,
technology, but real-time audio doesn't appear to be, or if it is, it's only available somewhere that's
exactly.
we can't access. But
Yeah.
yeah, I found that really sad, actually. It upset me because I imagined if I'd have been like that at that age, it would have, it would have broken my heart.
I think that's the one thing that's actually broken my heart, just listening and, to them and their story. And I know that, they will get there, but you know, they literally lost everything, like everyone, I guess, in the music industry.
Mm,
Things came crashing down for everyone. Everyone lost their livelihoods. But the young people, particularly, I think that, were so super excited and everything was about to happen. And then just literally overnight, nothing has happened
mm,
for a year on, because they all out there in the States, they locked down before we did. And so they've been going for a little bit longer, and it's just been that little bit harder, and they still haven't really kind of come back together again, and they certainly haven't pursued what they were pursuing before.
mm.
because that those tools have been plugged. But it's interesting what you're saying as well about technology and where it's let the younger people down, because a lot of them in clinic don't actually want to engage with it, and which I find quite fascinating,
Right.
because I consider myself to be an old person now in my 50s, and I've really embraced it. But I, and it's enabled me to continue working. It's enabled me
Mm.
to help people through this pandemic, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to work and I wouldn't have been able to help people.
Mm.
So I
Well,
think,
there's such a huge
mm,
physical side of music performance. That I don't mean just for the performers, but for the audiences as
yeah,
well. What happens between them? I think
mm,
Kay Tempest wrote in her book that there had been an experiment done several years ago, and I forgive my lack of knowledge of scientific um, words, but they sort of managed to measure all the heartbeats of an audience that were at a music performance, and what came out of it was that they all started beating at the same pace in front of the music that was being performed. So there is literally a very real coming together and living in a moment together
mm,
when in proper performance. So yeah, I always sort of smile wryly when all the tech platforms start announcing you should be doing this online and streaming that and doing this, and it's as if it's just a bit like the U2 song, even better than the real thing. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
and of course it's not. And of course there are quite a lot of youngsters that don't know about the real one because they're not old enough to have gone to a show, or they're or were just about to last
yeah,
year, like my student.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that would have been a wonderful experiment, actually, to measure those heartbeats, because that is exactly.
That's the wrong word. Somebody else will probably put in the comments somewhere what the right word is.
Yeah, but it is exactly like you feel like you're beating in the same time, in the same moment with everybody. Everyone's there,
Yeah.
and there's no feeling like it. Nothing compensates for live
Mm.
music, I don't think. It's
Mm.
completely, my drug of choice. I it takes you to a completely different place with lots of different people all simultaneously, and yeah, it's
I
wonderful.
I interviewed a therapist, another therapist, on the first series of this, and he talked extensively about the sort of increase of addicts that he meets who are,
Mm,
normally to do with drugs and alcohol and pills and stuff like that. But then in the last 5 to 10 years, they've been adding all kinds of tech, phone, computer stuff to it as
mm.
well. Do you get that with your patients, or is it mainly just substances?
No, it's not. It's a whole array of things, actually. So gaming's a big one. Um, yeah,
Right.
when we were talking about tech, gaming's a massive one. Sex addiction as well is a
Mm.
massive one with
Yeah,
nicotine.
so you mentioned that. I don't know much about gaming addiction though. I mean, is that similar to gambling addiction or not? Can you tell me
It's
a
it's
bit
a
about
real thing. So people will get up in the morning and they would go straight to their computer to play their game. And again, I guess it's a way of connecting with people. They play these online games, and they
it's a
are.
huge community, isn't it, of the gaming?
Yeah,
Mm.
and a lot of the games are like team games, so they're helping each other all the time. So I guess it's an outlet, like people would take drugs. It's an outlet for relaxing and
Mm.
escapism. A lot of these games are, the tech on some of these games, it's like real life, really. Particularly if you get, what's those things called where you're fully immersed in the game?
Oh, like the Oculus
Yeah, yeah. I
and
can't
all
remember
that,
what
yeah.
it's called, but yeah. What's it called? It'll come to me in a
I'm
minute.
the wrong person to ask. It's half the reason I keep talking to you about it. I don't
Everybody will be writing in the comments.
know. Yeah.
Yeah,
But when you say that, I mean, you say it's good because it relaxes people that like gaming. It's a relaxing thing. So what's the problem with with the patients that you've?
but it's a bit like drugs, isn't it? It's to a point, it will relax you, it will help you to feel calmer, but then it gets to a point where, it will raise that adrenaline, and depending on what game you're playing, and it becomes addictive. So it kind of then takes over your life. So you're maybe not going to work because you want to do your gaming. And so then when you don't work, having sick days, and your boss becomes a bit of a problem. It becomes a bit of a problem for your boss. You may not be earning the money because you're spending your time, excuse me, gaming. And it's just that cycle. So instead of people necessarily, taking heroin or pills or cocaine, they're sitting there and they're gaming, and they will game all night. So they're not sleeping properly, they may not eat properly, and they kind of like lose their motivations. So like with my clients, they kind of like find their creativity's gone because they've spent so much time in this game that and again, like with drugs, they take drugs sometimes to help with that creativity. Then it gets to a point where it doesn't help with the creativity anymore. It actually hinders the creativity, and it's a similar kind of thing that they just, instead of popping pills, they're sitting there gaming, and it becomes quite insular as well. So even though they are kind of connecting with people, they're not really talking about anything. It's all very superficial, and also they're sitting in the dark a lot of the time. So they wouldn't be getting you're sat there in the lovely sunlight. I'm sat here in the lovely sunlight, but they're in a dark room with the windows closed, and they could sit there all weekend and not have a life, and not able to, pen their songs, or, remember anything that they may have picked the guitar up, and they may have, written something. They just forget it.
Yes. And
There's
it's mostly adults that you're talking about, isn't it? That you
young adults, not even young. I've got older adults as well, who are big gamers. But I do have, yeah. So I kind of work with people 18 and upwards, 17 and upwards. I can work with younger people, but very often it's 17 and upwards. I've got a couple of 15-year-olds, but apart from that, yeah, everyone's an adult. Yeah.
balance seems to be just trying to think of how to conclude this conversation. It's so lovely talk to you about this, which I've put off so many times because I said, well, let's save it for the for the show. I don't know what we call it, a show, but balance is the thing, isn't it? Because I mean, even in the last half hour, just talking about tech, it's clear that there's lots of really helpful things. It is a tool. And it can help connect people who couldn't otherwise. And then at the other extreme, it's it's dangerous like any other drug. So balance must come up a lot when you're treating some of your clients. What do you offer to find that balance? I know my experiences from long ago sort of came through Buddhist practices. To try to find that middle way, which I'm still doing, every day, trying to. Where do you guide those gaming addicts, can we call them, and other people suffering with dependency that you work with? Where do you point to?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think you have to come back to self always, and I think if you know yourself, if you're trying to balance, very often we're outside of ourselves. So when we're gaming, we're not really in ourselves. When we're taking drugs, we're not really in ourselves. So I think what we offer here at the Creative Well, different ways of doing it. So we talk. We talk a lot, and everyone is guided to kind of come back to self again, and to ground in self, and kind of like align with what they want. What do they want to achieve? And I think when people align to the path that they're on, then that's easier. But a lot of the time, people say they want something, but they're doing something else. And it doesn't really marry. So it's almost like you want to bring somebody back to self. And we do that in different ways. We can do it that by talking. We do that a lot through the yoga work that we do. We've got a couple of different yoga teachers. And so we actually help people to center themselves. We also do a lot of meditation as well, and we practice different healing modalities as well. So like Reiki, we would do as well. But a lot of the time, it is about kind of helping people through talking and kind of helping them to get back on the path that they think they should be on. And
Mm.
that's not about us telling them what they should be on. That's about them kind of coming to those
Mm.
conclusions themselves. We kind of guide them, we walk that journey with them. But yeah, it's never you must do this, and it's definitely not one size fits all. So we work with people
No.
very individually, and all our treatment plans are based on that individual person. So we
Mm.
wouldn't give the same person the same, you know.
So is it fair to say you sort of try to facilitate individuals to reconnect with their authentic selves?
Yeah, I would say that's that's, I mean, all the other stuff that I do, because I'm a nurse, an independent nurse prescriber as well. So, if people come to see me, I will prescribe them methadone, Subutex to help them to stabilize on some
Mm.
pharmaceuticals. But that isn't the real problem. That's
Sure.
it's kind of like what's underneath that. So my work would be really to help them realign with who they really are. Yeah.
Mm.
I see that as the biggest part of my work, and everything else is just helping to support that, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and I think it's a really noble profession that you're in. And I know some other people that are working in a similar way to you, and I don't think we can get enough of
No,
people working in your industry.
no,
Nadine, thank you so much
thank
for this conversation,
Lovely
and
talking to you. Thank you.
looking forward to working with you very soon.
Very excited to work with you. Yeah, really excited. Thank you so much for supporting us as well. It is very
My
appreciated.
pleasure. My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
See you soon.
Take care. Bye.